Hello, back again. No school tomorrow. So, back in my basement making another video. First, I want to get to some questions. And actually, this is probably going to be two videos because I can't figure out how to show my face and my PowerPoint at the same time. So, this is probably going to be two videos. But you guys had really awesome questions in the exit ticket. Those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, you didn't do it. But those of you that did, you had great questions. So, I'm going to start with them and answer them first because they're really good questions. And thank you to the four of you that did this. The others of you need to go do your assignments. So, first one was, which is a really good one, and this is why I ask these because I always think that I do a really good job, but obviously not. Why was Austria so frightened of nationalism? That is an important question to understand. I'm sorry, it's an important thing to understand the answer to because it is crucial, really, for the next 100 years. So, nationalism is about sharing combined cultures, combined languages, combined history, and that if you share those things, you should be sovereign, that you should be your own country. So remember, when we say something is an empire, it means it's made up of a lot of different nationalities. And the Austrian Habsburg Empire is made up of a ton of different nationalities, right? There's Germans who are the preferred group, right? That's the preferred nationality. Then we have Hungarians, we have Serbians, we have Croatians, we have Hungarians, we have Czechs, we have all these different people who speak different languages. So they all speak a different language. German is only spoke by less than 25% of the population. Second, they don't share a common heritage. They don't share a common culture. They don't share anything in common. So, for the Austrian Habsburg Empire, of those isms, the one that's the scariest is nationalism. Because if all of these people rise up and want to be their own country, there's no empire. So I hope that answers it. If not, let me know. But that is a really an important question to and answer to understand. It is really important because nationalism is the fear of conservatives. Nationalism is also the fear of middle class people because what happened in France is what they're afraid of. Okay, does that make sense? Next one was a really important questions that two people asked, but about different places. Why did rural people in Italy not support the revolution, and why did rural people in France not support the revolution? And again, this is me thinking I did a good job. One of the things that we have to think about with rural people is the most important thing to them is usually always going to be a connection with their church. These are Catholic people who have strong ties to their parishes because they live in rural places. So they aren't urban. They don't have schools. They don't have things in Paris or things in Rome. So they're very traditional, and this should be making sense to you now that I'm saying it, traditional tied to their churches. And that is conservatism. And the church does not like liberalism or nationalism. And so, because the church doesn't like it, they don't like it. And so, that's again a very simple thing to understand. And it will be the hardest thing for Italy because the Pope does not want a combined Italy. He will not ever want that. The church will never want that. And I'm going to do a spoiler alert from the 1920s, even though we're not remotely there. That is why the church gets the Vatican, because Mussolini finally says to the Pope, if you will agree to this unified Italy and tell everyone that it's okay, we'll give you Rome, we'll let you have. And that is where the Vatican comes from, because the church is conservative. And in that way, they want things traditional, the way it was. All right. So those are good questions. So rural people, their first allegiance typically, especially every place else, not Great Britain, but every place else, is to the thing that makes the most to them and is the most influential in their life is their parish church. And so we would think that rural peasants would want all these things that liberal and nationalists say, but they don't. They get their information from their priest standing at the altar during Mass, and that comes from the church. So that's another good question. Hopefully you understand the answer. The church, and again, this is the Catholic Church. We're not talking about the Protestant Church. That doesn't make any sense because these are not Protestant people. Does not like liberalism and does not like nationalism. Okay, so let's go to the next one. One I don't know the answer to, but tomorrow I have a meeting with my professor. We have our Zoom class, and I will ask her this because, again, I'm telling you, this is exactly where we are in my grad class. Why do they call themselves charterist? I have no idea. I do not know that. I will ask my professor because her um, um, area of specialties, area of specialty is British history. So I'll ask her and see if she knows. And the question about Kagan, who would be liberal? The liberals are the middle class. The liberals are the upper middle class enlightened people. So that would be lawyers, doctors. Those are the people that want this to happen without, or change, governmental change and reform to happen without revolution. And then my last question, which I really liked, it's kind of a cool question, was how did people show that they were opposed to revolution? Did they burn things? Did they? For the most part, they didn't participate, right? It's hard to have a revolution when you have no participants. So it was easily shut down, and the government did a really good job of shutting it down. And because of that, the revolutions didn't succeed. So we are in our last little bit of pages, and this is where I'm going to, because I need to show you the art of Romanticism. So maybe I'll figure out how to put these two videos together, but maybe you'll have to watch two videos. They won't be long, I promise. I got my timer set today, so I don't have to do the up close and scaring you guys with my face up close to the video. So we are on our last pages, and now I got to take my glasses off so I can see my notes. So we are on our last pages of Romanticism, and Romanticism is one of our isms. Romanticism really is important. If you look again, it is an often tested essay topic on the AP exam. And it is important that you memorize 2 or 3 people in each of these categories. Now, this is our first art movement that's going to be more than art. This is really going to begin this whole thing of art, music, literature. It's a big ism, Romanticism. It's huge, and we need to make sure that we know all about it. So, when we think again about art, oh, my dog is down here. I thought I closed the door. When we think about art, again, remember, we've got, just like with religion, we've got that pendulum swinging thing. And during the French Revolution and the Enlightenment and all that, we swung to this very reasoned out looking art, that it made sense. A man looked like a man. There were pictures that we could understand. Oh, that's a picture of a war scene, or that's a picture of a man in an operating room. We had all these different things. I haven't looked at myself up close. I looked really tired today. So, what we now have with Romanticism is really important: emotion over reason. And I'm going to show you some pictures and you'll see what that means. This is emotional art, and it's going to be emotional literature, and it's also going to be emotional music as well, because we're going to get into that as well. So the next one is A2, glorification of nature. That is a huge part of this romantic movement. It rejects the Enlightenment view of nature as harmonious, and it rejects deism, right? This is like, nope, this is not what this is. This is the glorification of God in nature, and that we will see. It rejected enlightenment about everything, encouraged personal freedom. 5, emphasize feeling. Humanitarian movements, fight of slavery, poverty. They don't like the Industrial Revolution, and we'll see some pictures of that. It draws upon the ideals of middle age, honor, faith, chivalry. It's very, very popular in Germany. It really gets its start in Germany, and it's very popular there. And then in Central Europe, romantic, peasant life, folk tales, proverbs. Rousseau is really one of our romantics. And if you flip back and look in your notes about if you look back in your notes about Rousseau, when we first did that, you'll see that we called him a romantic and that we would get to that later. And again, this noble savage, that's where we get that from. All right, top of the next page, Immanuel Kant. Again, he's really a romantic. He's a German romantic. And again, this is really a very Germanic movement. It's where it's really going to start. Grimm's fairy tales, all of those stuff. Again, Romanticism inspired by the French Revolution, um, Storm and Stress. And in the middle of page 20 is Romantic poetry. So this is where we're going to get into this literature. Romantics believe that poetry was supreme over all literary forms. Now, we've not talked anything at all about poetry in this class. And those of you in my ag class know I don't like poetry at all. It's not anything I enjoy. But this is where poetry excels and begins to be what everybody reads, right? This is the sign of a well-rounded gentleman to have books of poetry. These poets are going to be superstars in their lifetime. Johann Wolfgang Goethe is Faust. It's one of the most important romantic. Selling his soul to the devil. In England, we have William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Again, very much romantic in this poetry with nature. Sir Walter Scott with Ivanhoe. Lord Byron, who is quite a character. And Shelley. All of them, again, these very romantic. Lord Byron's going to die in the Greek fight for independence, which escalates him, but he's not a good character. Anyway, you can read up on him. Scandal, scandal, scandal. Even in the 21st century, it's scandalous. Literature. Now, literature, again, is one that the College Board will write about in the Romantic era, because really it's the only real literature movement that we talk about in this time period. And they really like to mess you up on things like George Sand, who really is a woman who can't write as a woman because nobody would publish anything. So she's a female writer, emphasized themes of true love of nature and moral idealism. Don't get wrapped up in that romanticism is romantic, right? It's tragic romance. It's not, rom-com kind of fun, frolicky movies. This is everybody's gonna die kind of romantic type thing. Victor Hugo, who writes Hunchback, again, right? This hunchback man falls in love with this girl and tries to save her, and it's not going to work. Les Mis. And then at the bottom of page 21, Grimm's Fairy Tales. And again, this is the moment to say, if you've ever read real Grimm's Fairy Tales, you know why that word Grimm sticks around, because they are not good fairy tales, right? The Cinderella fairy tale, the stepmom cuts off her children's feet so they would fit inside the glass slipper. I mean, that's not the story that we get from Mr. Disney. These are Grimm. And again, this idea of nature, how nature can turn on you, that people aren't always the best of people. And then what we'll look at in just a moment, because I can't figure out again how to have my face and the PowerPoint at the same time, is art. And we'll spend a lot of time looking at art because there are a lot of questions about art. And we'll go through these, and I'll tell you to get your notes back out again on page 22 to kind of scribble some stuff down. The most important romantic artist is Caspar David Friedrich, The Wanderers, Above the Mist, all of those. And then Turner, we'll look at him. He is an anti-industrialist, and we'll look at that. Music. The music, again, please look on page 22, F1. Romantic music places a strong connection with emotion as well as nationalism. This is when we start the idea of national anthems. And we did kind of listen to the national anthem of France. I just did it because the words are so horrific when we listen to that. But this is where we'll get the idea of songs being attached to countries and instantly knowing that country by listening to the music. And our most important romantic is Beethoven. He is a traditional figure, one of the first composers to convey inner human emotion through music. And again, one of his most famous and I love making these noises to you, is Beethoven's Fifth. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Again, that kind of ominous dun 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 dun. Again, very ominous. Except when they made it a disco song in the 70s, which was awesome. It's called The Fifth of Beethoven. It's a pretty cool song. Um, Ode to Joy, again, a beautiful song that gives a sense of emotion. Schubert also was going to write German songs at the top of page 23, Chopin, Polish, Franz Liszt is Hungarian. Please make sure that you kind of look through all of these. Franz Liszt is Hungarian Rhapsody. Let me see if I could do that. Um, oh gosh, I can't think of it in my head because I've got the Fifth of Beethoven. Wagner again is German. This is going to be a German nationalist, and Wagner, sadly, is going to be attached to German nationalism, and is really going to not kind of lose all of his reputation because the Nazis decide, even though Wagner is quite dead, by the time the Nazis they use his music, and he kind of forever gets pushed into this Nazi realm, even though he was way dead before that. But and then Tchaikovsky, who is Russian, and the Nutcracker and Swan Lake, all those songs, and then 1812 Overture. So all of that music, you need to know who they are, at least three of them from different countries, to attach the nationalistic pride with this nationalism and romanticism. They go together. We're going to look at it with liberalism, but really romanticism and nationalism are like walking hand in hand. Architecture, the British House of Parliament is definitely part of the architecture of romanticism. And at the top of page 24, this is the other part that's really important that we know is the idea of how romanticism connects to politics. So, romantics believe in revolutionary movements that will give people more freedom and control of their lives. And again, that is very important as a result of this. Supported nationalistic movements, and the art of the period team to idealize these movements. Germany again is going to be at the beginnings of all this. The Folkgeist, in Italy, Giuseppe Verdi's operas. Again, he is seen as the opera guy. In 1825, the name Verdi throughout Italy again would be used as this nationalistic thing. Now, here's what we're going to do. Look on page 25. The eventual failures of the revolutions of 1848 led to the disillusionment with the romantic goals and paved the way for realism. So when we look at these romantic pictures, our next thing is going to be realism. And so we're going to go from these beautiful pictures of glory of nature to pictures of people picking rocks out of a yard. That's literally the name of the painting, and that's what the people are doing. It is nothing except people picking up rocks or people picking up sticks or people working. It's a very gutty, realistic look at the world. That's the opposite. We're going to swing the other way. Our last look at any other ism before we go, I have to stop this and open the other one, is socialism. And socialism at this time period is really at its beginning. It's not even remotely close to what we're going to get at the turn of the century. But we do need to know that it starts. And the causes, again, is a desire to reorganize society to establish cooperation and a sense of community. That's the beginning. But two is the most important, an increasing misery of the working class, disturbed thinkers like Bentham and Mill. Why do some people have it so easy and other people life is just miserable? What about that? And here's the shift and the change of that, because prior to this thinking, um, the thought process and the reason why people accepted the misery was that they were going to receive their reward in heaven. And what changes that we haven't got to with religion is why do you have to wait until you're dead for that? Why should your reward be when you're dead? Why can't you have that on earth? That's the Protestant church that's going to be working with like John Wesley and Methodism and that change of God isn't vengeful, God is merciful, and life should not be like this for people on earth. So that's our change that we're looking at. Liberal practices in politics and economics seem to promote selfish individualism, and that in that way they fragmented society, which is bad. And it's not until the 19th century, late 19th century, that the issue of social justice gains a broad intellectual base. So we're at the beginning, but just describing that. It really begins in France with the French Revolution. And a lot of those things that we talked about in the French Revolution were very socialist in nature. And France is going to mess around with socialism for a long time in some form or another as they start to work their way away from the revolution. Um, and you can look at those different people, but who we want to look at on page 26 is two things. One of them is Christian socialism, and we'll get that when we get in our next chapter, our next set of notes with the Industrial Revolution. Believe the evils of industrialism would be ended by following Christian principles, and we'll see why that's important in this gap. So we'll talk about that. But socialism is attached to two men, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Now, here's what the College Board is going to do to you. Everybody knows Karl Marx. I think everybody knows Karl Marx. So you're never going to be asked about Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. You're always going to be given the name Frederick Engels. So make sure you know that. They both wrote the book. It's the same book. It's the Communist Manifesto. That book is everywhere. You can find it anywhere. It's over 100 years old, so you can read it if you want to read anything about communism. But it is considered the Bible of communism, this socialism, Marxism type of mentality. So, one of the important parts of this is that um, there has to be this dialectic of materialism. So, in order for true communism to work, it has to follow through these steps. There's an economic interpretation of history. All history determines economic practice factors. Who owns the means of production? Class struggle. Since the beginning of time, there's been a class struggle since the rich and the poor, and that the poor are always exploited. Theory of surplus value. The true value of a product is labor, and since the worker receives a small portion of this, their value is stolen. And we'll talk about that again in the revolution. Socialism is inevitable. Capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction, overproduction, unemployment. There's going to be a violent revolution. Please, on E, put a big circle around that. Why is everyone afraid of communism? Reason number one, violent revolution. Simple. We do not want a violent revolution. We do not want anything overthrowing anything. Um, the increasing gap between the proletariat, that's the worker, and the middle class will be so great that the working class will rise up and overthrow the middle class. We don't want that. That's why that's a problem. And then we will get the dictatorship of the proletariat. Anytime you see the word proletariat, it means working. And then a creation of a classless society. Now, the other part and the other reason why nobody wants communism, no one wants Marxism all across Europe is look at number 4. Marxism was an atheist philosophy, not agnostic, but atheist. There is no God. So, two things are going to make everyone terrified of socialism, Marxism, communism. Wrap them all up in a bow, even though they're not the same thing. Violent overthrow, atheist. Now, look at number 3 before we stop this and look at our PowerPoint. Marx saw women as being doubly oppressed. Capitalism paid them low wages, and society gives them second class status. It's the only real thing that anyone could pick up from and feel okay about with Marxism is that he recognized that women were doubly oppressed. They are oppressed by capitalists, and then they're just oppressed by society. Women eventually played an influential role, and you can see why this is very appealing to women, is that they are recognized by someone as being doubly oppressed. But again, Anytime you're asked anything about communism, Marxism, socialism, those two things should pop up: violent overthrow, and they're atheist. Scary things. All right. Following on the next 2 pages are charts about all of these isms, and you need to make sure that you are really comfortable and familiar with all of these isms because they are really important. And this chapter really sets up what's going to happen next, which they always do. All right. So now stop this one. How long have I been talking on this one? Let me see. My phone keeps locking up. Oh, 25 minutes. That was kind of long. All right. So I'm going to close this and then I'm going to open the romantic. I'm not giving you guys another assignment today. I'm going to put on your cheat sheet for this chapter so you can start working on that. All right. So don't know when I'm going to see you guys again. I miss seeing you. And hopefully, maybe we'll see each other on Thursday. Have a great Wednesday. Don't forget to listen to the other video.